So getting started is a really big one. You can't do therapy with men if they don't come into your office. And I have to say, in my experience, men that come into therapy often are already 3/4 of the way there. So one of the things I've done is in my outside life, I talk to a lot of people. I encourage them to get into therapy. I'm very, I kind of frame therapy as education. I frame it as being courageous and taking the lead and being helpful to your significant others. If you can get into therapy, it's a sign of courage and strength rather than weakness. And I also make it psychoeducational. That is, when a client comes into my office, the first thing I do is I say, welcome. I'm very casual. I'm very friendly. We often chat about the Red Sox or the Celtics or the Bruins or whoever. I mean, I've come from Boston. It's a sports town, so that's a metaphor I use a lot. And I make them. In my office is kind of neutral, so it's not feminized. And I shake their hand and I say my first name, and they come in, and I try to make them feel welcomed by being warm, real, and respectful. And real is just meaning that what you see here is kind of what you see in my therapy office. I'm not hugely different as a person. I see myself as a person first, a woman second, and a therapist third. And I think that a lot of people think of themselves as a therapist first, a woman second, and a person third, and I think that means that we're not genuine. I grew up in the era of Carl Rogers, and his being congruent and genuine really stuck with me. I think that's particularly important with men. And Sam mentioned that early in the earlier presentation, that if you kind of make therapy a less kind of stylized experience, that this is just one person coming in to another person's office to get some help, rather than there's a lot of role kind of scariness, then I think it works better with men, because it becomes a more casual, it's okay to come in, it's not pathological, they're doing something that's useful for them and others in their lives. So I also, in the very first session, I say, why are you here, of course, and then I listen to what they have to say, and I'm always careful at the end of the first session to say something like, I think we can work together, and I use we a lot, not you, but I use the we word a lot. I say, we can put together something. Let's put together an action plan, and I call it an action plan. I don't call it a treatment plan. The very word action is important. I call it an action plan. We've got achievable goals. In the second session, we make them operationally definable, which means how would you know that you reach those goals? I do this with women too, of course, but I do it more with men, because I feel like they need a very kind of clear, concrete set of accomplishable goals to make them feel like they can do something. And I actually feel like the whole thing of being versus doing, I'm not sure that it isn't bad to do. I think it's really good to do. I think being and doing, I think there tends to be this tendency to dichotomize things, male, female, the opposite sex, doing versus being. I think, independent, dependent. I think the truth is in the middle, right? We're interdependent. We're action-oriented, and we have feelings. All men have a female part of them. All women have a male part of them. And so I think these false dichotomies really get in our way. It's not thinking versus doing. It's thinking and doing. But I think with men, I think the doing part is really important to offer up front. And what I do with men is I make it much more educational and action-oriented at first. I reel them in, right? Then once I've got them hooked, I then kind of start doing more of the emotional expression. But my main goal, what's the main goal of the first session? Have them to come back, yeah. Right, I mean, if they're not going to come back, what's the point, right? So even if someone shows up late, I still say, thank you for coming here, that's great. I don't say, what happened to you? I frame therapy as teamwork, and I use the expression teamwork a lot, and I think that's talking the guy talk, which is how do you make things approachable for him? Well, you talk about we're on a team. This is really important, because I think, and I'm not 20, so at my age it's a little easier not to be intimidated by a man. If I was 25, it might be harder, but I don't have a problem with the idea of teamwork in that we're experts together on him. I don't feel like I'm the expert and he's the patient or client. I think we're collaborative and we're a team. Again, if you're 25, it might be different, but I think not. So in treatment, what works for men? Again, having a solution-oriented and positive focus. I can't tell you how important this is. The way I was trained was you start off, what's wrong, how long has it been wrong, how long has it been going on, how bad do you feel? By the end of the first session, they're depressed. what I do is I reverse it, and it's how, you know, we talk about the problem, then we talk about the strengths, what he has is, you know, so people that leave my office tend to come back and say, you know, I really felt really good after the first session. I had hope. And one colleague said to me, well, all you give your clients is hope? And I said, she felt like that was a bad thing. I'm like, I think that's like a huge thing. Hope is crucial, and that men really need hope because they have to overcome some barriers to get into therapy. So the two of you are a team, and you use Guy Talk. I don't have problems using Guy Talk. I work at MIT. It's a guy place. I have a partner. He's a guy. I do sports that are mostly with men. I know how to talk Guy Talk. It's really simple. If you don't, how many people do not do organized sports in this room? I would suggest all of you do some organized sports. I think it's hugely important. It's a way to understand the man's perspective, and again, the teamwork and the sports thing. I think it's also good for women to do some kind of organized sports. I think it's, you know, helping us expand our horizons. So I use Guy Talk a lot, and Guy Talk is direct, down to earth, words like action, team, going on a fishing trip, hunting. Sam talked earlier about, he was working with a truck driver and talked about shifting gears. I try not to use psychobabble in the sense that I don't use words that, like repression, resistance, you know, I try to use very down-to-earth language. And I think that it's harder for men if you don't do that because it makes them feel pathological. And the one thing I don't want my clients to feel is pathologized. And I'll show you a clip later of a scene where the male client is pathologized in about 1 second. And I tell you, if people feel pathologized, anybody, they're not going to come back. Have a sense of humor and employ it. I use humor a lot. I just saw a male client before I came Thursday night, and he was giving me his copay, and he gave me a 10 and a 5, and I dropped it on the floor, and he picked it up and handed it to me again, and I dropped it. And I said, geez, I guess I don't want your money. And we both laughed, and he kind of handed it to me. It was very funny, and it was a way of sort of bonding and being. Humor is a way that men can really feel connected, and so humor comes easily to me, and it feels like the humor is a way of laughing together. Sometimes I laugh about a male client. I said, your ear flaps are closing, you know? And he just laughs, and there's a kind of a playful aspect, which means he doesn't feel shamed by me. It's, we're in this together, we're laughing together. I sometimes laugh at myself, like with the money. I go, well, you know, I make mistakes, I laugh, and I think the laughter really helps men feel at ease in our offices. All this is true, by the way, for women clients. None of this is unique to men in particular. I just think that men have to get over so many hurdles to get into therapy because of their socialization. And I'm also very honest and upfront about who I am as a real person. I self-disclose a fair amount, probably more than most people. I self-disclose usually about things like, you know, being on a tennis team, or I don't know, something that's not, you know, okay, I'm you know, having trouble with my sex life. I mean, I'm careful what I, but I self-disclose, and I have self-disclosed about problems I've had in the past. I don't tend to ever self-disclose about stuff I'm currently dealing with, just to have good boundaries. But I often say, if someone says, where are you going on vacation? I was trained to say, why are you asking? And I think that's ridiculous. I'm like, I'm going to Whistler to go skiing. Oh, you know. And then I don't say later, why did you ask that? I feel like sometimes that real relationship is really important, and he wants to know where I'm going. I'm going to Whistler to go skiing. You know, it may come up later that there's some, I actually self-disclosed with a female client about buying a house, and it turned out she was buying a house, and she was jealous, and so sometimes if you self-disclose too much, you can kind of get in, it can get in the way a little bit. But in general, I think self-disclosure is a way to really help men feel at ease and feel like you're an equal. And the trick as a female therapist is you, as a woman, you're kind of one down by our cultural standards. As a therapist, you're one up. And what I want to do is to come in like this, to be equal. There's no, the men in my office are no better or worse than I am. We're just in different roles. But some men come in and they're already kind of putting women down, and that's, I think, one of the trickiest. How many people have had male clients who've been kind of dismissive of women? That is one of the hardest. That is tricky because it just gets at you. And we'll talk about how to handle that. Let them set the pace. One of the mistakes I make is I move too fast. I had a client once who was, had an abusive mother and a detached father, and I was pushing him to express his feelings, and the more he expressed, the more I thought this therapy is going great, and then he started to cry, and I'm like, now we're really getting somewhere, and then he didn't come back. And I called him, and he said, well, I really think I've gotten what I needed from therapy, and I'm done. I'm thinking, you know, you just started.